Hi everyone, this is Abel. Welcome back to my channel. Today we have a slightly different setup because my webcam decided that she doesn't want to cooperate anymore. So I'm changing the setup and I'm still trying to figure out how to move forward. And let me know if the video and audio quality is sufficient for you, if this new setup works, or if I go out and buy one of those really fancy, really expensive reflex camera or something that kind. Something that a professional booktuber will use. Anyway, the actual review was recorded before this tragic event, so in a moment you will find the original setup that I usually use. So enjoy the reviews, and then after that we will go and I'll give you a few reading updates, okay? But as always, remember that if you enjoy science fiction and fantasy books, this is the perfect place for you. So if you like this video, consider subscribing, leave a like, maybe share it if you want to see more. And now, here is the review. The first book I'm going to talk about is Meta by Tom Reynolds. This is a funny story because I think this is one of the first books I have ever downloaded on my Kindle. I've been a subscriber to one of those services when you get deals on your email daily. I think it's BookBub. Yeah, I think it's BookBub or something like that. So with my very first Kindle, we're talking about something like 2017, maybe. That it wasn't even a touch screen to tell you how old it was. I actually had to use buttons to flip the pages, and I actually missed that Kindle because it was a little bit more comfortable to use than the more recent one I had. But I digress. The screen was not that great. The actual Paperwhite I'm using now, even if it is pretty old, it still has a better reading experience. But I digress. And I had that deal in an email with free fantasy and sci-fi ebooks, and I downloaded this because I liked the cover and because it has a cool concept. It gave me that just by looking at the image, this feeling of something that reminded me my experience with comic book superheroes as a teenager. I have never been a huge comic book reader, but the few I read, the few I've committed to, I loved endlessly. And you know, it happens that when you download something for free, you don't feel the urge to go and consume it right away. And I think I have too many ebooks on my Kindle just because of that. So years passed. Since 2018 I have never read that book, which was actually published in 2013, so it's been out for more than a decade and it's very much beloved. And I never came around it until a couple of weeks ago, actually last month. I was in line waiting to do some, I think I was at the doctor, yeah. And I had my Kindle with me, of course, because I'm getting incredibly bored and I don't want to be doom scrolling on my social every time I have a little bit of free time. So I tell myself, you know what? Give it a try. Just give it a try. Pick a random ebook you have on your Kindle and download it and read it. And I have my Kindle organized by genre, and sometimes if I have many books from the same author, I have reading lists for a specific author. This one was in the sci-fi subcategory in my reading list on my Kindle. I downloaded it and it was a blast. I think I've read it in a couple of sittings, and that for me it's huge, it's different because the writing style is so compulsively readable. It's so easy, it flows by smoothly, and because it is so fun. So let's talk about the book actually. Meta is by Tom Reynolds, is a superhero novel. I know that there are not so many books that try to give you the experience that you will have reading a comic book novel or watching a comic book movie, of course, because it is pretty difficult to translate that kind of aesthetic and the bombastic quality of that kind of stories on the written page. But it can be done, and it can be done very well, like this one. The story hits all the usual bits of the coming of age slash hero's journey that you will expect from a superhero. So it is very familiar. The general setting is something that you will find really, really comforting if you've been watching at The Boys on Amazon Prime. Even if I don't like that show that much, I've seen just a couple of episodes, then it goes too hard, too out there. It is too much for me. I respect what they're trying to do on a conceptual level, but it is simply not my jam. But on a general setting, I like the fact that you have many superheroes in the setting of this story, and you can see the actual consequences of having a society when day by day you were going through struggles because a huge percentage of the amount of people having superpowers, they were using them to do evil stuff, and a small percentage was trying to use it to do good, and it created a lot of conflict and destroying the actual normal lifestyle of an entire planet. When the story begins, the protagonist is called Connor, I think. Yes, it's Connor Connolly. 10 years have passed since the end of the superhero era. Metas are not around anymore. Something happened and they slowly died out. So the world is basically free of meta, and they call them meta because everybody acquires their superpowers by wearing what they called meta bands that looks like bracelets. And there is a whole explanation of how they work and how they can visible or invisible depending on the moment and why they're using them. They're visible when you're not using them. They basically disappear. And a huge part of this first installment is how Connor is trying to figure out how to use those superpowers. But at the beginning of the story, something happens and he wakes up and he has metabands. And he has to try to understand how to survive because incidentally, there's a huge surge of new evil people using metabands. And the news are all around pestering people trying to acquire new information. And you'll see that Connor is going to meet what it is, I think, some kind of this version of Batman for this world. They call it Midnight, I think. It's I think the only superhero that actually doesn't have any kind of superpowers. He's a regular guy with a lot of beautiful toys, like the Joker will say. And it is done very well. The relationship he has with Midnight is pretty believable because Connor is struggling between this desire to learn more and to do something good with those powers, and at the same time balancing it, we try to hide the fact that he has those kind of superpowers and the way all of that is disrupting his actual natural lifestyle, all of his habits and all of his relationships. Another big conflict is the fact that his older brother is a reporter, is a journalist, or a blogger. I think it's a blogger, and he's actually in love with all the conspiracy theories surrounding the metas. So he has to try to be very careful not to be discovered by his older brother. And they have a very special relationship because both of them, of course, they lost their parents 10 years ago, just around when the world it was full of metals all around, and many people were dying during the big fights between those metas. So they lost their parents, and that's a huge source of internal conflict. I like how Connor is depicted in a very natural way, in a very believable and relatable way. His internal dialogue is very deep without being heavy, without being heavy-handed. I think it's done very tastefully. And it is very funny because Connor has this self-deprecating attitude. He is constantly throwing jokes at himself because he knows that he's kind of a loser. A little bit like the Spider-Man from the Sam Raimi movie was. And he's smart, but he's not that smart. He's not capable to outsmart his opponent. He has to learn. He messes up a lot trying to figure out how to use those powers and how to survive. And the book flows so smoothly because there's a lot of action, a lot of things happening. Maybe two things happening all at once. At the beginning, you ask yourself, why is it Connor constantly stumbling on those huge fights and all of those huge set pieces? That doesn't seem believable. But there is an in-world reason why that it's happening. So if you find yourself not committed to the story because it doesn't seem plausible that many pivotal moments and many huge moments happen so fast and one after the other, just wait, because the story gives you a pretty understandable explanation. I think it's done pretty well. I think the only really downside to this story is that the superhero version of Connor, when he wears up his suit and when he does superhero stuff, it is a little bit overpowered, because I've kept discovering abilities in many chapters, one chapter after the other. He was able to do new stuff, new crazy stuff, and he was able to defeat his enemies in a believable way, because he was not just snapping his fingers and doing stuff. Every time he was discovering new abilities, he was messing up, almost dying, destroying stuff, doing huge mistakes, and then slowly understanding how to use those stuff. But he is able to do basically everything. Teleport, flying, throwing fireballs, or not fireballs, maybe ice, throwing ice. It's a lot of stuff, maybe a little bit too much. You know that many superheroes, they take their name because they have one specific ability, like Iceman, for example, or because they use that elemental power maybe. But his superhero persona is called Omni, because he's basically omnipotent. And I think that it lowers the stake in a considerable way. I would love for him to have just a specific set of power and trying to understand to use those, and maybe unlock levels of power in between, in that restricted corner of the superhero spectrum. But it doesn't make the book, that kind of omnipotency doesn't make the book less enjoyable, just because Connor is such a compelling and funny and endearing character. The whole book is interwoven with this kind of subtle irony, with very funny jokes, with a light-hearted tone that goes in stark contrast with the ending, that it's very action-packed and very dramatic and very hard-hitting, and it ends up on a painful painful, extremely painful cliffhanger that left me eager to jump on book 2 right away. I didn't do that just because I have commitments and I have to do other reviews and read other books, because I said, yes, I'm gonna review that and I am a man of my word, but I was so tempted to jump on the book right away. And I finished that at the end of 2023, after I had filmed my favorite books from 2023. So I wasn't able to put it in that celebration of my favorite books of last year, but it was worth it. It was high on top of my personal chart. And I want to shine a light on this book and potentially on the rest of the series. I think we have 5 or 6 books and they look cooler and cooler because the covers are beautiful. If you see the cover for the last book in the series, it is stunning. And it is an example of how you actually write good, character-driven, very compelling, very funny, very dramatic, and very action-packed superhero stories. I want to see something like this in a movie, because it has everything we need in a superhero movie, and it doesn't have all this stupid, incredibly stupid and dumb stuff we had during the last 5 or 6 years from very famous superhero movie franchises that have been so much disappointing. This is perfect. Someone give Tom Reynolds the budget to do a movie adaptation or maybe a streaming TV show, because we deserve it. We have gone through so many incredibly bad comic book adaptations and books to TV or books to cinema adaptation. We deserve something good, and you should definitely check out this book because it's so funny, it's so relatable, it's so fast. If you need a palate cleanser in between huge space operas and huge epic fantasy books, this is perfect.
A couple of reading updates. I just finished The Winds of Change, the first book in the Elements of Time series by Paisley. I just finished it a few minutes ago, just before starting the recording for this video, and man, I am shocked. I am shook. I am still trembling because this was so powerful and emotionally charged. I enjoyed the book, but the last 20-25% is fire. It is so good, so unexpectedly good that I'm still in a lost of word, still searching for the right words to give you a proper review. It will take me a little bit of time, maybe a couple of days. I'll try to give a review before the end of the week, but I'm making no promises because I want to do it right. I want to give the right importance to this book because it is that good. And I also finished last week The Rest to the Gods by Joshua Walker, an epic fantasy book. That one is crazy good too. I can't imagine how it is possible to cram that much of an adventure and that much of a powerful story in such short amount of pages. It is actually annoyingly good. And of course I'll try to give you a review, maybe in the same video when I review The Winds of Change by Sam Paisley. And I just got the arc for The Son of Prophets by Bryan Wilson. And the first book, I quite like it. It was one of my favorite books of 2023. And I've been chatting a little bit with Bryan. I'm pretty sure that this one will be even better. So I'm pretty eager to start it. I have commitments though. I cannot start it before I read The Faded Dragon by Cameron Michaels, which it is a very, very good looking book. You see, it is right there, down there, and I'll show you the cover right here, that it is about dragons, of course, and elves. It is about an old war between dragons and elves, and somehow the characters in the actual timeline are dealing with the resurgence of an ancient evil. I don't know much more about that, aside that the cover looks good, the synopsis sounds good, and I'm pretty eager to go and read it. And I'm reading also Waking Ursa Minor by Helen Rygh-Pedersen, because February 24, book 2 in this series is coming out and it will be published. I'll put the cover right there. This is an epic fantasy, and I've been reading just, I think, 10-20 pages about this, and it get me this reaction. Nice. Has a very interesting aesthetics and a very interesting world building. If I'm not mistaken, please, author, correct me if I'm wrong. This is about floating islands. So yeah, it is pretty interesting. And I can't wait to go and deep dive and read more of this. I have other reading updates. You can find those on my Instagram page, on my X profile, and a few of those on TikTok too, when I'm recording my experimentation with trying to resuscitate old books and restore old books, because I'm crafty that way. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today. Let me know, how do you feel about this new setup? If you should go and change the angle, how the lighting is, how the sound it is, if it is good enough for you, or if I should go out and spend a lot of money to make it look even better. And remember that if you enjoy science fiction and fantasy books, this is the perfect place for you. Leave a like, consider subscribing, maybe share this video, and if you want to see more, remember that you can see more right here, right now. Thank you for being with me today, and I'll hope to see you in the next video. Bye.